Welcome. This is To Our Core with Katie Murray, and this is the place where we peel back our layers to uncover who we really are at our centre, at our core. And think of it as a chat with your bestie, the one who can make you laugh until your belly hurts, who is ridiculously unfiltered and will lovingly call you forward to help you cut through the noise and get real with yourself. Around here, nothing is off limits, and we are mixing this up with equal parts humour and heart, so let's dive right in. Hey there, and welcome back to today's episode. We're going to be discussing something that I think is incredibly common, and yet often we keep it incredibly private, and it's that moment where you're watching yourself do the thing that you promised yourself you would not repeat. The behaviour that you've analysed, you may have even journaled about, your friends have heard you talking about it often. You know the one. And maybe even you've gone to therapy, worked with a professional about this, yet here you are, here again, doing the same thing. Maybe it is sending the message that you said you wouldn't send, to the guy that you know is not going to lead you to a path of happiness, yet you send it anyway. Maybe it is staying quiet when you were meant to speak. Maybe it is the over-explaining that you do. Maybe it is the overworking. Maybe it is the scrolling instead of actually resting. Maybe it is saying yes when every single part of your essence screams, no, I don't want to do that. Maybe it's even reaching for control when actually what you need most is support. And if you're listening to this and thinking, I know exactly what you're talking about, Katie, I want to invite you into slowing this right down and say something very clearly to you. Nothing has gone wrong. This discussion today is not going to be about you needing to be tougher because you're weak and that's why you're engaging in this behaviour. I am not going to tell you that you are undisciplined. I am not going to tell you that you are behind where you think you need to be. And you are certainly not defective. And realistically, that is how a lot of us view ourselves. We view ourselves like there is something wrong, that there is a defect, and we just have to work out how to fix it. What you are experiencing is not your personality. It is not who you are. However, it is a nervous system pattern. And today we're going to be exploring why knowing better doesn't automatically mean doing differently. You know those motivational quotes or memes that you watch, maybe on Instagram or TikTok, and you're like, I feel enlightened. I feel like that just spoke to my core and it told me a truth and I'm never going to forget it, and therefore my behaviour will automatically change. And I want to also explain to you why insight alone doesn't actually create change. Now, in saying that, I have often talked on this podcast about awareness being the first step. And I stand by that in the respect that we can't change what we don't know. So having an awareness and an insight into our behaviours is really important. However, just knowing that something is a problem for us is not often the thing that is actually going to lead to sustainable change. And I also want to talk through how we can start relating to these patterns in a way that actually opens the door to true transformation rather than just tightening down and really embedding ourselves in the loop of behaviour, of going, I feel enlightened, I feel awakened, I acknowledge my behaviour isn't supportive for me, and yet I do it again. This episode is going to be intentionally slow. There will be space to pause, to reflect, and to notice what's happening in your body and your mind. And I'm really interested to invite you into a space where you take notice of what happens for you internally when I give you that space to pause. Do you feel uncomfortable? Do you feel a sense of needing to fill the space? Do you feel irritated and like you, when you're listening to this episode, are going to be like, just skip through it, Katie. Like, I don't want to pause. Because in that irritation, in that discomfort that you may feel in this episode, when I invite you to pause, there's the key. I'm going to be inviting you to listen gently. You do not need to take any notes. If you are walking or you are driving, that's totally fine. And this is not about you mastering something in order to get it right. I just want this episode to allow you space to meet you where you are. Because we live in a culture that quietly, and sometimes very loudly, tells us that awareness should equal mastery. That's why the quotes on Instagram are popular. Because it does stop you in your tracks for a moment. It does make you think. However, the assumption there, I think, is that you are somehow going to be transformed by merely just reading the lines as you scroll. There is a message that is pushed that once you see the pattern, you should just be able to stop it. That insight alone is the finish line. And when that doesn't happen, a familiar internal voice often shows up. And it might sound like, why am I still doing this? Why am I circling in this same loop and I always come back to the same spot of sending that 11 o'clock message to the ex-boyfriend? Or engaging in the overworking and the overperforming? Or the over-explaining of feeling need to fill the void in some way in order to make yourself heard? Of tightening your grip around control instead of realizing that actually the key, it actually comes when you loosen it. And often people are saying to themselves, and maybe sometimes out loud, is, I don't think other people struggle with this. Like, I have already learned this lesson. I do not understand why I need to continue to repeat this to myself. And what the hell is wrong with me that I keep repeating these same behaviours and doing the thing even when I know better? And here's what we rarely talk about. Knowing something intellectually is not the same as feeling safe enough to live it. Knowing something intellectually is not the same as feeling safe enough to live it. So I'm going to give you a few different scenarios, and I want you to really tap into which one your body responds to, which one resonates within you. Are you the person who keeps over-functioning at work? Or even maybe in motherhood, and you're the person who is known to be capable, competent, relied upon. You know that you're doing too much. You know that you're exhausted. And perhaps you even fantasize about the idea about what it would look like and how dreamy and perfect it would feel to slow down. Yet, when an email comes in, or if you're a mum, someone asks for help, your body moves before your mind can even intervene. Yeah, I'll take care of that. I've got it. Don't worry, I've got it. No, it's no problem. I can do it. And it's not necessarily because you want to. It is because responsibility feels familiar for you. Because being needed feels safer than being still. The slowdown that you're craving, it might feel nice at the start, and then I'd be really interested to see when it lasts for longer than you're used to, what happens in your body. Or perhaps it's the person who keeps returning to the relationships where they feel like slightly diminished. Below the standard of what they want for themselves. Not like overly mistreated, like in a way like of abuse, just so that they're smaller. Just those looks that says be less. Less expressive. More careful in what you say. And those people, they know that they want more depth in their life, in their relationships. They want something that is reciprocal. Perhaps they're craving emotional availability, and they know they're not going to get it from that relationship. Yet familiarity pulls harder than the desire for something different. Because unpredictability, once upon a time, perhaps that hurt you more than loneliness ever did. Loneliness within a relationship. Or perhaps it's the person who avoids rest by staying busy all of the time, even when they are saying, I really want to slow down. They feel absolutely every gap. They've got their headphones in. They're listening to podcasts. They're doing the errands. They're running the plan. They're doing the tasks. Because when things go quiet, their body doesn't soften and relax. It instead braces because stillness feels exposed for them. And movement, the busyness, the constant doing, that feels protective because it is expected. It is because what they have always known. So I'm going to invite you to pause for a moment. I'm going to invite you to bring to mind your pattern, the one that quietly repeats itself. And I am really inviting you not to go straight into analysing it. I just want you to notice it. And as that pattern comes into your mind and you're just paying attention to it, I want you to see if you can replace the question of why do I keep doing this with something just a bit softer. And that is, what makes this make sense? What makes this make sense for me? These patterns, they are not, contrary to public opinion, evidence that you're stuck. They are, however, evidence that your system learned something important, often very early in your life, often unconsciously, that you didn't clock it and go, that's an important lesson, I'm going to take note of that, and then I'm going to repeat it for the rest of my life. We are absorbing messages and learnings all of the time, often between the ages of 0 and 7, and we don't question them. Yet they become our pattern, and they tell us how to stay connected, safe, or intact. And one of the most important reframes we can make is this: that your behavior is not random. It is organized. It is intelligent. It is so very protective of you, even when it's inconvenient. Even when that pattern is frustrating. Even when it no longer fits the life that you are so desperately trying to build. Consider the person who procrastinates. Maybe you've told yourself a story about lack of discipline or laziness. I just want to clarify something for you. Procrastination has nothing to do with laziness. It's often about pressure. Those people who procrastinate, they want to do things well, like really well, and they often care really deeply about that thing. Yet somewhere along the way, effort for them became entangled with expectation. So their system delays, not to sabotage them, although it often plays out as a sabotage. It's instead to try and regulate them. Or maybe you're the person that will see yourself in the one who intellectualizes everything. You can see your patterns so beautifully. You have insight for days. You can identify the behavior. You can describe it. Yet insight keeps you one step removed from actually feeling. Because thinking about it became the safest place to live. If I just think this through over and over and over again and analyze my behavior, I don't have to sit in the feeling in my body of what I'm trying to protect myself from. Or maybe there's the other example of the person who wants to keep numbing themselves with food, wine, scrolling on social media, distraction. And it has nothing to do with a lack of willpower. And I think this is such a common pattern for so many people around the numbing. And that people are almost numb to the numbing, that they don't realize that they're scrolling on social media is a way of numbing. They don't realize that the busyness and the distractions is a numbing. They don't think about the food that they're putting in their mouth as a way of numbing, or the alcohol they consume just to relax on the weekends, or maybe not even just on the weekends, but it's just a knockoff drink each night. It is a numbing because their system has been running hot for too long. Numbing, despite what it may look like from the outside, and despite sometimes how it might feel on the inside, it is the opposite of not caring. It is a sign that care once upon a time was unavailable to them. So they're protecting themselves. If I just don't feel, then I'll be okay. I've had clients start with me in a coaching container, and sometimes in the very first session often, or even on a connection call where we're making sure that we're a good fit for each other, I will ask them about how they're feeling. And you might be thinking that someone might come into a connection call with me wanting change, and they might be in crisis, or they might be feeling all of these heavy emotions that they want to release themselves from. And yes, sometimes that can be the case. However, also what I see a lot is people saying, I feel numb and I don't know how to feel anymore. I am numb to joy. I am numb to heartbreak. I am on autopilot and I want to feel more. More joy, more contentment, more gratitude, more presence. And the thing is that your nervous system, it does not respond to logic. Hence why the thinking this through or analysing your behaviour in your head won't give you the greatest outcome for sustainable change. It responds to experience. It responds to what has been rehearsed, what has been repeated over and over and over again, because once upon a time, that strategy, that pattern, that experience worked for them. It kept them safe. So when you try to just choose differently without addressing safety, the body often says, you know what, that's not familiar enough yet. So pause and ask yourself gently, what did this pattern of behaviour, whichever story or scenario that I shared, or maybe one when I asked you to pause earlier in this episode and asked you to identify what pattern is showing up for you, what did this pattern once protect me from? How has it worked for me in the past? Not what it costs you now. I instead want you to ask what it prevented then. And just sit with that. Just for a moment. Pause. Because this is where self-understanding deepens. Beyond the surface level quote. Beyond the realization that, oh yeah, I'm doing it again. Why am I doing that? In that pause of not asking yourself why I'm doing it, instead asking how has this worked for me in the past and what was it protecting me from, stops you from pushing the pattern away and instead asks you to listen to it. Because let's talk about familiarity. The nervous system will almost always choose the known over the nourishing. Think of it as familiarity is like a well-worn path or even a well-paved superhighway. You've walked it or drove it so many times. Even if the destination that you get to at the end leads somewhere uncomfortable, you know it. You've been there several times. It's predictable. You know the turns in the road. You know what to expect. Change, however, asks you to step into terrain that your body hasn't yet mapped. You are going off-road. You are going into the bush. And you know what our brain loves? Is ease. And that's why calm can feel so unsettling. That is why healthy dynamics in relationships can feel boring. That is why rest can feel edgy. Or by you being treated well, you can feel suspicious. That's the first thing that comes up for you. Yeah, but why? What are they up to? Instead of receiving it like you deserve. And I've seen this in people who finally get what they ask for, whether that's space or support or stability, And then they report back to me that actually things feel really weird and strangely unsettling for them. And their mind, they catch it saying, yeah, this is good. Like, this is what I've asked for. And their body's saying, where's the catch? So guess what happens in that space? Your patterns return. Not because things are wrong, but because your system is like recalibrating. And if you've ever wondered why you move away from what you want right as it arrives, this may be why. Your system isn't resisting the joy or the opportunity or the possibility. It's just not sure how to tolerate it. So sit with this in a moment of reflection. Think of a time when life felt quieter, steadier, more spacious, and notice what showed up after, like shortly after that happened for you. Maybe you're even noticing it in this podcast episode, where when I pause and I'm silent, you're okay with it at the start. And then you're kind of like, all right, now it's time to talk. The pause has gone too long. What are you feeling? Is it restlessness? Is it irritation? Is it a need for busyness? Is it a pull towards old habits? Maybe it's pulling out the phone and filling in the time. Just notice. No fixing. Just notice. Think about your patterns. Think about that quieter, steadier, more spacious time. And then acknowledge, when did it feel uncomfortable for you? Are you uncomfortable yet? With the silence? With the listening into your body? Are you feeling an urge to hurry me along? To fill the space with my voice? That's your nervous system speaking. So what about willpower? Willpower is really ineffective. I mean, it can work best like for short-term surface level change. Like if you just need a quick fix, then willpower might get you through. However, when a pattern lives in the nervous system, the worst thing you can do is often apply pressure, because force often backfires in a big way. And you might be able to override it for a while. You might be able to white knuckle your way through it to stay on track. And eventually, the system looks for a relief, an escape, a way to busy, a way to fill in, a way to resort back to what you know. And when it does, you know what's sitting there waiting, just waiting for you to take it up. And it's the old pathway, that superhighway sitting right there. Familiar, efficient, well-rehearsed, known. This is why shame doesn't create change. In fact, it tightens the system. It increases the vigilance. It reinforces the very state that keeps the pattern alive. So instead of asking, how do I stop this? Like, how do I just stop? I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want this pattern for me anymore. Try instead asking, what would help my system just feel a little safer right now? So in those pauses, those prolonged pauses in this episode where I didn't fill the space with my voice, how would it have looked for you to instead be like not looking at whatever the timer was, whether it's on your phone or whether or not it's on your, your car stereo or whatever it is that you're listening to this through, and like going, how long, much longer is she going to pause for here? Like, come on now. What about if you just took a big deep breath? Because safety, it's not an indulgence. It's a regulation. And often we want to regulate ourselves quick smart without actually giving ourselves space and time to build the foundation of really sustainable change, which happens through regulation. And here's what integration can look like for you. So when the pattern shows up, instead of going into the spiral, if you do pause and name it gently and say, oh yeah, this makes sense now. You acknowledge the effort that is beneath it, that it just wants to protect you, that this is history, that this is your experience, and it's well rehearsed. Yeah, I see it now, that makes sense. And then through the pause and the acknowledgement that it's there, you can often choose a different path because you don't need to act it out. And you don't need to exile it either. You could exist with it, thinking of the pattern not as an obstacle, instead as a signal for you. A signal that something inside of you is asking for reassurance or pacing or support. And like I said, often taking a breath here is the interruption that you need in order to disrupt the pattern. Notice your body, your shoulders, your jaw, your belly. Nothing to change, just noticing. And in that noticing, over time, this relationship with self, not control, is what in fact loosens the grip. So if you're going to remember one thing from today's episode, maybe it's that you're not that comfortable sitting in the pause of silence. However, I want you to remember that this is not about you doing something wrong. You are responding from a system that learned how to survive. This strategy worked for you once upon a time. It protected you. It benefited you. And so you repeated it. And now it's become your default. Now is learning how to feel safe enough to evolve, because like I said, change does not come from pressure. It actually comes from permission, from patience, from safety. I would be so interested to hear from you. Send me a DM on Instagram at Katie Murray Coaching. And let me know how this episode felt for you in your body. Maybe it wasn't the mic drop one-liner statement that you heard me say that made you go, oh yeah, light bulb moment. So you can intellectualize it. So you can name your behavior and then do nothing about it. Maybe it was actually realizing that the pattern is your discomfort with doing something different, which may have been listening to a podcast episode today that had periods of silence in it. Whatever happened for you in this episode, whether you disliked it or whether or not you loved it, or whether or not it felt enlightening for you, because it might have been the first time today that you actually tapped into your breath or tapped into your body, let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because there lies the cue, even sometimes in the irritation or the discomfort. So thank you, as always, for spending time with me. I really would invite you to take a few minutes after this episode to jot down your thoughts, like I said, whether or not that's in a message to me or just to yourself in a journal, to take some big, deep breaths and just really sit and notice what stirred for you. And I will be back next week, and I can't wait to chat to you again then. Much love, as always. Go well. Thanks for spending time with me today on To Our Core. If something landed in your heart or gave you a much needed giggle, consider sharing it with a friend who also may need this as a timely reminder. And go on. You know you want to. Give me a 5-star review so that this podcast can land in the ears of many, many more people. Because remember that life is too short to stay on the surface. Keep living, loving and laughing all the way to your core. Go make life great. And if you want support around this, go to the show notes to find out more. Until next time, I'll meet you back here with more truth, laughter, and a whole lot of heart.